This week on Break It to Make It.
Communicating through guilt or shame language is really the language of the world. And so I want people to not feel bad about this, but just to be aware of it.
Hello and welcome back to Break It to Make It, where we meet people who've thrown out the rule book, failed forwards, or taken the road less traveled to come out on top. Now, positivity is usually seen as a good thing, right? It's something to aspire to strive towards, turn that frown upside down. But can you take it too far? Can positivity hurt people? Can you hurt yourself? Can you hurt others? To help us unpack it all and open our eyes to this concept of toxic positivity, we have an extra special guest today. She's a mum, podcaster, and essentialist who loves to engage in courageous conversations, especially about truth, trust, and boundaries. She's the host of the wildly successful Create the Ripple podcast. Welcome to the show, Candice Smiley.
That's awesome, Fallon. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. Now, toxic positivity, it's a little bit weird. Some people might have heard about it before, some people may not. What is it?
Well, I think at least my interpretation of it is where you're choosing to sort of force this happiness. And it happens, I think, a lot right now because we have this social media dominated culture, which I'm not 100% sure is necessarily for our best interest in terms of our mental health and stuff. And so you end up seeing the highlight reel of people's lives. And it's sort of this forced energy, right, of this toxic positivity. And I've seen the effects of that in my own life. People often comment, I mean, my last name is Smiley. So, I get it. People think that's kind of funny, but it sort of led to this energy where I felt like I always have to be up. And sometimes my up self doesn't want to, or commits me rather, to things that my down self can't. And, for those of us who are highly creative, I know they're nodding along and they feel that in a big way. Or perhaps you're a mom, or like me, I'm an introvert. And so I deeply need these quiet times and recharge times. And this culture of toxic positivity really doesn't allow me that space or freedom to say, hey, I'm having a bad day without being labeled as emotional, which is typically not something that's positive, though it's deeply feminine. And I think that for those of us who are women, or even the men, but certainly for women, we flow. We really do. We have cycles. We have energy, whether it's our physical bodies, we have energy based on that. And I think this toxic positivity doesn't allow us to really lean back into that and find a freedom to just show up authentically. And when you're not authentic with yourself, that break in integrity causes all kinds of internal challenges.
It seems like there is some shame, potentially. Some people feel some shame associated with just normal, natural human emotion, or just regular failure, lessons being learned, and that social media is perpetuating this cycle because, especially when we're in those down days if something's happening, it's so easy to look at social media and see the highlight reel of somebody else's life and think that that is what's really actually going on.
Sure. And I mean, even if it is, kudos to them for learning how to put boundaries, learning how to express their needs, learning how to create that space where they can feel good most of the time. But the reality is that it just sort of sets up this energy in this space of it's not okay to be not okay. And so I've been loving, the shift we've been seeing lately where people are talking about their mental challenges and talking about, well, it wasn't good for a long time. And I mean, certainly if I look at my story, I was faking it to make it for a very, very long time, forcing a smile. Looked great on paper, looked even better in photos. But in the background was literally dying, was literally barely holding it together. And I wish I had found the courage to say, you know what, I'm not okay. Because as soon as I started to do that, when I had my big break in 2020, and I just finally said, F it, I'm going to be real. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell the stories I never tell. I'm going to talk about what really happened and not force a smile. People went, really? girl, why didn't you tell me? And what was interesting is my worst critic, the person who was hardest on me, was not anybody who was outside of me. It was actually my own internal voice. And so since I've learned that, even if I do receive some negative pushback when I'm showing up in my authentic way, I look at that person with a whole lot of compassion, because I know that that negative comment is born from its own space. It makes me say, well, maybe you're not having a good day, and I can respect that, and you can be real with me. And I think that it takes some courage, but it's so much easier to be courageous when you're in your own power, because then you're wearing whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through. It's almost like an armor. You're like, you can't hurt me. Like, here's the realness, right? There's nothing to hide. And it's that hidden stuff, I think, that destroys us the most, at least from the inside out.
Yeah, I love how you say, but when you're in your power, other
Mm-hmm.
people can't hurt me. But let's
No.
create space for how toxic positivity could be harmful, especially for our health. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, certainly for me, if I go back through my story, and if anybody goes to check out my bio, I've basically broken it down through, through years, where these moments, these very big storybook moments almost, that defined who I was and how I was reacting in the world. And a lot of times it was something that was incredibly negative. But if you had looked at the highlight reel of my life at that time, I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't saying, hey, this is not good. And so what ended up happening was I was putting a band-aid over it. I was, shoving it away into the corner of my mind and saying, I'll deal with that later. The problem with that is that that lack of integrity to yourself, when you're not acknowledging when your boundaries were crossed, when you're not acknowledging when you're acting to make other people comfortable, sort of breaks you from the inside out. And so I struggled with, wanting to self-harm to various degrees. I struggled with being honest. It wasn't that I didn't want to not be truthful. I wanted to tell the truth, but I felt like if I said, hey, I'm not comfortable going out in this way, or I'm not comfortable not smiling in this instance because of the trauma I'm currently working through, I felt like I'd be judged for that. And so it created an incredible divide between myself and friends, between myself and partners, between myself and even myself. And so in 2020, when I finally said, I'm going to be me, I'm going to show up as me, I'm going to tell my story, I'm going to tell it, whether somebody loves it, believes it, what, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to live in my own truth. What happened was, I was terrified, Fallon. I was absolutely terrified that all of this negativity that I had been pushing away, this unhealed trauma and all of this stuff, was going to come crashing down on me, and I would succumb to all these self-harming ideas that I had. The opposite actually happened. I felt relief. I cried for sure, but it felt healing to do so. Like, I was like, oh, this is good. I should cry some more. Like, I should get this out. And then when I started talking about it, what I started to get was these nods. And I was like, wait, you were also there? Wait a minute. Why have we been hanging out for 8 years or 10 years or 12 years and not talking about this? We've missed opportunities to be authentic. We've missed opportunities to connect. And I've just now, I get excited when I talk about it, because choosing to not be happy all the time has been much more profound in terms of creating my happiness than trying to pretend I was happy. It's so much easier to say, actually, I'm not having a good day today. Like, yesterday was a mom day from you know where. And it felt great to just be like, I'm having a mom day from, and I'm just going to be in it. And I find that now when I lean into it, rather than trying to pretend it's all okay, and also not over dramatizing the fact that it's not okay, but just being like, it's not great right now. We'll get through it. There comes this relief, there comes this freedom, and that's one of my core values. But that's, I think, what I want other women listening to this to feel, is it's not as scary on the other side. Sure, I had to unpack some stuff, and that was very scary, but the feeling felt better. It felt better unpacking. It felt better not being positive. It felt better being like, no, today's not a good day, but tomorrow I'll try again. It's all good.
I'm hearing that there might be quite a relationship between toxic positivity and perfectionism.
Yes.
Those impossible standards that we apply to ourselves, ironically, never others, which is so
No.
funny. I feel like people hold themselves to much, much higher standards and expect things that we would never dream of applying to other people. And it's interesting what you said about the doors that would open with that conversation. I remember something that happened in my friend group. So I'm incredibly fortunate to have some amazing friends in Australia, and we're all mothers. And one friend in particular, she's been my best friend for more than 15 years. She had her kids, and we were talking one day, and she just said, "Oh my gosh, the photos of you and your kids are always so great. It always looks like you're having an amazing time. The birthday parties look amazing and all that kind of stuff." I was like, "Yeah, but you didn't see the 100 photos that I had to take to get that one photo." So I sent her one. I'm like, "Here, look at this one where the other one punching the other one in the face."
Yes.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yep.
And then it opened it up, and we got deep into this conversation about, Pinterest birthday parties and all of that kind of stuff. And what we discovered through conversation was that even a person who knows me better than anybody else, who I thought I was closest to, we'd put up walls to show each other these perfect lives. And so then we were like, this is absolute nonsense. Let's get vintage on this. And so we brought back the concept of the shitty potluck. We started saying no to Pinterest worthy parties. What kind of birthday parties did we have as kids? I don't know, a packet of snacks and sack races. And so we started to do things like that, and that's a vibe that my husband and I have started to try and bring back into our family situation as well, which is, you know what, the house isn't perfect. The house looks like people live here. That's okay. And just have people over anyway. And it's so amazing, the response that we've had. People love it. Like, we had some friends over for Halloween. Our house is currently going through some renovations. We've got plastic off the walls and everything. And there's something about it that makes other people feel relaxed as well. Like, once you strip away all of that pretense, it's like, you're coming as yourself, I'm going to come as myself as well. And the intimacy and the closeness that we're able to create with our friends around that has been so wonderful. And I can't believe that we've been robbing ourselves of the opportunity to create that closeness with people because we were worried about, what would they think if there's dust on my baseboards? Whatever will they think?
As I think, I should make sure I dust my baseboards. That's a really good decision. Yeah, no, I love that. I completely agree. And I live in a tiny house. It's 324 square feet. And so oftentimes when people come to visit, I warn them, I'm like, we live in this house. And, if we leave out toys on the floor, I have an 11-month-old. If we leave out, one dish, it looks messy because there's not a lot of space in here. And they come and I say, we can sit in the computer chair, you can sit on the couch, you can sit at the table. Either way, I could probably touch your knee from wherever you are. So come and be close. And people generally laugh. And like you say, they show up with a different energy because you did.
Because you did. And I love that. There's talking about how people show up and sometimes mirror your energy. I want to create space for how we accidentally behave in these terrible toxic ways. And so it's all well and good for us to be like, oh, this is how I've been the victim of toxic positivity. Yes. But let's dive a little bit into what are some things that we can do that might seem innocent that are actually pretty toxic.
So I think a big one for me is this pretending that I'm always okay. And so I'm an introvert, which for me just means I need some me time to recharge. Doesn't mean I'm not social, doesn't mean I don't love getting out. But for me, I need the downtime. And like I was saying at the beginning of the show, sometimes my up self, right, when I'm enjoying it, having a great time, commits to something that then when I'm not feeling it, for whatever reason, I'm tired, I've given all week, whatever, feels like I have to follow through. Feels like I have to show up with a smile on my face and look pretty and do all those things. Versus what I've been starting to do now, if someone says, hey, do you want to get together Friday? And I say, yes, as long as it's okay. If I wake up on Friday and I'm not feeling it, you don't mind rescheduling because I got a busy week or I'm just becoming aware of that. And people who have known me for years know that I'll cancel last minute or show up late. Lateness is how I know when I'm out of sync with myself and I'm tired and I'm probably living in that toxic positivity place where I'm trying to be all things for all people. It just shows up that way. And they're typically coming back and going, oh, yeah, absolutely. Or when I call it in and I say, hey, not feeling it today, would love it if we could reschedule to Monday. That would just be so much better for me. And really leaning into the fact that, yeah, I'm great. I just need to sleep, or I just need a nap, or I haven't showered. Like I need some time. Typically it frees up the other person to say, you know what? I wish I could say that more often. I'm like, well, do. It's certainly to me. Start with me, because I'll totally respect if you text me and say, just not feeling it. Love you. Can we talk another time? And so it's insidious. Now, here's the part of it that, we can unwittingly put guilt on. Communicating through guilt or shame language is really the language of the world. And so I want people to not feel bad about this, but just to be aware of it. For example, recently, there's a woman in my life. She's got a fairly significant place in my life. And she said, I'm desperate for pictures of you and the kids. And I'm pretty careful about sharing pictures with my kids, largely because my 7-year-old recently said, hey, Mom, I kind of want to have some control over what you're sending. And I'm like, absolutely. Consent is a thing. That includes mommy sending photos. And I responded with, great. I will chat with the fam jam and figure out what I can send you. And she said, well, we would just really love it. And it's just for us. The second you hear extra words like I'm desperate for, that's your issue, not mine, that you're desperate. You've made a request. It's my decision to whether or not I want to happily acknowledge that. And then every time you hear the word just, beware of when you're using it or when you're hearing it, because it's a pretty good indicator that you're attempting to manipulate or create, even slightly with a good intention. There was nothing ill intent about it, but it is some of this thing that sort of pushes you beyond that space. So it could be, well, we're just going to have a few friends over. We're just going to get together for coffee. Just come over, and visit us for a few minutes. I just want to see you. I've driven all of this way. Anytime you feel that energy, that's a great opportunity for you to stand up and say, hey, not okay today. Not okay. Just going to draw your attention to that. And so I love talking with that people, because a lot of times they say, oh, I used just like yesterday. And I'm like, I know. Once I realized what I was doing, I stopped doing it. Right? I just want to hang out with you later. You can come in your jammies. Well, maybe they don't want to.
It's true. And so, what I'm hearing here is, one thing is a dedication to the ultimate kindness to yourself,
Yes.
right? Getting space to be kind, even where it might create some conflict or create an opportunity where somebody else might be disappointed. It's committed to being kind to yourself. And then secondly, a lot of our listeners work in a corporate environment, and words like just and only and this minimizing language can often be part of just commonplace conversation. How many of us have heard, hey, Fallon, can you help me with this? It should just take a second. Well, it shouldn't take that long. It's only this, right? And that sort of language, it can create that shame spiral, because let's say, for example, that for me, it's not my strong suit. For the person asking me to do it, it might be really simple for them. For them, it may not take very long, but what if for me it takes a long time? And then you get this sense of, oh my goodness, am I failing? Because this feels so much so big to me. And I think that some of this extra potentially toxic stuff too can sometimes be well-intentioned people accidentally minimizing. And no more do we see it when people are trying to help when faced with someone else's situation, like grief or something.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. This is where the phrase really sticks to me. The what is it? The path to hell is paved with good intentions. So if someone is grieving or something has happened, things like everything happens for a reason, or other people have it so much. The good news, other people have it so much worse than you. Being thankful for what you have, by skipping over that and not just saying, I'm sorry that you're going through that, or acknowledging and just sitting in space with somebody who's having a tough time because it's tough and important to them right now. Trying to make someone feel better is sometimes the worst thing that you can do.
It's a selfish thing too.
A selfish thing, because you're uncomfortable.
Yes.
Hanging out with someone who's sad or uncomfortable. Yeah. What tips do you have for people? Because I used to behave like that. And I'm sure that I'm guilty of doing
I
it
did too.
too. But now that I've become a little bit more aware of it,
Yep.
I am mortified if I ever
Mm-hmm.
accidentally do it. But in the same way, I really feel like since stopping trying to show the world my representative, the cleaned up better version of
Yes.
myself, to my friends and people who are close to me, since making the choice not to do that, and then also creating space for them to do that, or just saying, I'm so sorry, would you want to talk about it, and asking people what they need versus assuming that they need to be pumped up. What other tips do
Yeah.
you have for us to be better humans in those moments?
Better humans. Well, I think about, in 2020 when grief hit me and the people who, were trying to make it better, right? Because, when Candice wasn't happy, just speaking in third person, but when I wasn't happy in the way that they were used to that made them uncomfortable, right? It brought some fear, which I have to respect, right? But there was the people who said, hey, you're kind of messy right now. What do you need? Do you know what you need? Right? Because it gave me a chance to say, I just kind of want to be alone. Okay, sure, I'll check in later, right? Or I'd say, I don't know what I need. And they say, okay, well, how about I just come and sit? I'll just come. And I had people I live about an hour outside of a major city, and the people who actually got in their cars and drove and then just sat there. I was like, this is real. This is real. You're okay to be uncomfortable. And I found myself apologizing, like, I'm sorry, this is so heavy, this is so whatever. And they're like, I'm here. I'm here for it. I gotta go at 3, but I'm here. I'm here for you. And that had such an impact on me. That was like, I gotta remember to shut up, that it's not about me when someone else is going through something. And I've seen that have a huge effect on how I respond, like yourself. I've tried to make people better because it was uncomfortable for me. But once I was willing to lean into what is uncomfortable and what is messy and, not positive, it's funny how you're less afraid to deal with it with other people because you're no longer expecting them to be a certain way. And I think that's another element of this toxic positivity. People expect you to be a certain way. And so you respond to those expectations. And those are covert contracts, which we know have such an impact on us. And they're passed on down. I had an opportunity this weekend to speak to my daughter who was receiving some gentle guilt language from a family member because they were going to go do something and they thought it would be fun. And I'm sure it is going to be fun. And she was dealing with some fears of, well, what about this and what about that? And I said, you know what? Here's the deal. If you want to go and try, cool. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for having the courage to tell me that you're excited and you're nervous about it. That's awesome. You don't have to just be happy because everybody else is happy. It's okay to be 2 things at one time. And then she said, but if I say no, then someone's going to be disappointed. And I said, and here's something really important. If you have to disappoint one of 2 people, it shouldn't be you. Now you have to do that kindly. So we practiced some words because as a former people pleaser, I needed to teach myself words. I needed to practice disappointing people. And it wasn't until somebody who seemed to have no trouble disappointing people finally said to me, Candice, it's going to be a few seconds of discomfort. You will feel that in your body. You're an empath. You will feel uncomfortable. You might feel like throwing up the first few times you do it. That feeling does pass. So expect it. And for me, I've always appreciated people tell me the truth. And so then the first time I went to go do it and said, I hear you. I want to do it. And I'm not going to do it. I'm going to make a decision not to. They were like, oh, and you could tell they were disappointed. I could tell there was impact. And I could say, I don't want there to be impact, but I need to take care of me. They went, well, yeah, I'm disappointed, but it's whatever. Like they moved on and that feeling went away. And those are typically either the people who then moved in a different direction because they were no longer willing to accept this different version of me that was more authentic and more empowered, or they respected me more for it and came back and said, I was thinking about what you said. I was thinking about, this sort of thing. And so it was really great for me this weekend to empower my daughter and say, it's okay to disappoint someone else. It's okay to try. It's okay to do that kindly. And here's how we do that. And she said, well, what if she's mad at me forever? I said, she won't. She won't be. And I said, How would you feel if she came to you and said, I don't want to do this? You might be sad. You might be disappointed. She's like, yeah, but I'd probably figure out something else to play. I said, exactly. And I said, so we need to let people hold them to this higher energy, this higher space. But it was important for me to express, you know what? It might not feel great when you do it for her or for you. But I don't want you to be uncomfortable the entire night just because you don't want to disappoint somebody else.
And you know, that's the thing that holds us back, isn't it? As you said, it's the fear of disappointing someone. You know, for men and for women, there are some documented differences, but we're held to these societal standards for women in particular. I mean, think about the nursery rhymes we're raised with. What a girl's made. What sugar and spice and all things nice. What a boy of, what is it? Slugs and snails and puppy dog tails. You know, little girls should be seen and not heard. Things like that. And in many ways, for men, they're conditioned to. You know, society says to them, "Don't show your feelings. Suck it up. Be a man. You know, do these things." But maybe they are nervous. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're an introvert. Maybe they don't want to do those things. And so, again, it may be less about the confrontation or having somebody hold them back, but the judgment of that in some way they're not fulfilling their societal manly duties by self-selecting out of something. And then, again, women, for all of those reasons, and especially caring or service type things. No, I don't really want to do that. You know, there's a lot of assumption that if you ask a woman for help, it is expected by many people that she will say yes. And it's so, it gives people whiplash if they say,
it does.
Yeah, or I'd rather not. Like,
what? Excuse me?
My goodie. I think did you just say yes?
No. I love it. Yes. And this is really important. I want people to know this. Like, no is a complete sentence. I'd love it if you could do this for me. No, thank you. And you're right. They're like, excuse me? I'm like, no, thank you. Oh, well, why? Just no, thank you. I don't want to. It's not my job description. It's, you know, it's not here for today.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for people to get to that no is a complete sentence thing. Some awkwardness, and everybody has the opportunity to decide. You know, everything's contextual, right? If someone random who you don't really know or have a relationship with asks you for something, no thanks. Yeah, totally. Or just not today. So it's absolutely perfect. And people do need to practice it. And the more you do it, the stronger that muscle becomes. And like you said, you can relax into it. I'm having so much fun talking to you, Candice, but we are reaching the end of our time.
I know.
So I wanted to wrap it up with, for everybody who's been listening, nodding their heads off their shoulders and thinking, I have to get after this. I really have to fight the toxic positivity. What's the one thing that they could do, or the one thing that you hope listeners take away from our conversation today?
Well, I think it's going to require a little bit of work. And I think that it's, you know, in order to break out of that cycle, it starts with you. And I think about my own journey, and it was not easy for me. It was nearly impossible for me to speak my truth. I used to text it. I used to write it. I would do many of those things. And so I would say, grab your journal, grab a piece of paper, and start to think about those places where you're not, you know, you don't want to be happy. You don't want to do it. You don't want those kinds of things. And then take it one step further and figure out how you'd like to respond. Because I had to figure out what I would say. Love to, can't right now. You know, I would love to, but, you know, I had to have those things figured out. Or I had to learn to say, yes, I'd love to. Let me think about it and see if I got the resources to follow through. I had to sort of give myself that barrier where it wasn't just me. And I know that's a lot for the listener, but I get the impression that your listeners are in action, they're in motion, they're willing to think about it. And the funny thing about this is you don't even have to like dedicate hours and hours and hours to do it. Just make a note in your journal, make a note in your head, make a note in your notepad on your phone. your subconscious is going to start to work on it. And the next time somebody asks you for something, or you realize you're scrolling and you're getting into that space where you are choosing to look at other people's happiness or consider that over your own, not being authentic to yourself, you're going to be reminded of it. You're going to have a different thing. You might pause for half a second, and in that half a second realize, I don't actually want to do this. How can I express this? And it might be, I don't actually want to do this, but I love you, so I'd love to support you. Can I do something else? And I've found that it doesn't have to be pretty, but it does need to be honest, because when you communicate from that place, even if someone doesn't love the response, they hear you and they receive it in a very different way.
It's a great piece of advice. If you'd like to learn more about Candice, you can find her at Candice Smiley on all your favorite social media channels. So just get after that. And also do yourself a favor and check out her incredible podcast, the Create the Ripple podcast. Candice, you've been amazing as always. Thank you for sharing your beautiful spirit and big, beautiful brain with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.